I was looking everywhere, but I was unable to find her. God knows where she had gone. After looking almost an entire day, I started to feel worried about Maria. Maria and I had recently gotten married, and we were here in Los Angeles for a honeymoon trip. I met Maria a year ago when I was visiting the Philippines, and I instantly fell in love with her. She was the sweetest, kindest, and most unique girl I know, and as I got to know her, I fell more for her. She had the most beautiful eyes, which were shaped like almonds. She was wearing a knee-length skirt with a knitted shirt, and her curves were showing in the right places, giving her a well-defined body. Her voice was as soft as if she was playing a melody while talking. Slowly, we both fell in love with each other. I stayed there for about a year just to be closer to her, and then we decided to get married. It's been only a few days since we got married, and we came to Los Angeles for a honeymoon trip, but as soon as we got married, I started to notice changes in her behavior. It started to feel like she was a completely different person. When we were having romantic moments, she would space out, and sometimes it would feel like she was trying to recognize me. One day when I woke up, I found that she was not there. I called her, but she did not respond. And when even after 2 days she did not return, I started to lose my mind because I was unable to imagine her not being there with me. All kinds of scenarios started to cross my mind. I thought, what if she ran away from me? But she came willingly with me after marrying, and she looked so happy that we would be together forever. So what could have happened? Did someone abduct her? But she slept right beside me. I would have noticed if someone had broken into our room. All of these thoughts were taking over my mind, and I started to lose my senses. The last conclusion I came up with was that she had run away from me because of her changed behavior patterns that I had noticed after our marriage. I guess she did not love me enough to imagine the rest of her life with me. I did not want to go back because I was still hoping that she would come back to me. So I rented an apartment there and started to look for her on my own. I lost my appetite completely and started to feel dizzy throughout the day. But then I thought, if something were to happen to me and then she returns, what will happen to her? So I decided to eat something. That was when I saw a Domino's pizza outlet on the side of the street. I went in and ordered a veg-loaded pizza and sat in an empty seat on the corner. As I was waiting, I heard a familiar melodious voice that I could recognize anywhere. I looked around impatiently and noticed that she was there wearing the employee uniform and talking with a customer. I immediately went near her and said, "Maria, what are you doing here?" She looked at me with a look that broke my heart. It was the look of unfamiliarity, as if she was oblivious to my existence till now. "I'm sorry, sir, but who are you, and how do you know my name?" she asked with innocence in her look, as if it was our very first time meeting. I would have fallen in love with her all over again, but this time, it was just shattering my heart into pieces. I was her husband, and she was refusing to recognize me. And it did not look like she was doing it on purpose, because I could read her expression and her eyes that she really could not remember me. I decided to win my wife back and make her remember us at every cost. So at the time, I said that maybe I just mistook her for someone else. I ordered the largest pizza on the menu and sat there looking at her for hours. She was like an angel, and I wanted her back in my arms. I hated how other men were looking at her and were trying to make advances toward her, but I felt relieved by noticing her cold responses toward them. I came again the next day and spent most of my time there ordering pizzas and just staring at her. She noticed me and came closer. "Sir, is there something wrong? Why do you keep looking at me?" she asked me with an innocent voice. I wanted to tell her it was because she was my wife and I wanted to take her away that moment. But I held my inner thoughts and said, "It's just because "You are so beautiful, miss, like a delicate flower which people would want to protect." She blushed as I said that and turned her face away. She smiled lightly and returned to work. I felt like I was reliving those moments when we first fell in love, so I decided to do the same and make her fall in love again. So I started to come to Domino's Pizza every day and would look at her work for hours. She started to have small talks with me, and I could not help but notice her being flustered around me, which made me feel a bit relieved. Slowly, our small talk turned into long conversations, and we started to hang out. One day I asked her out, and we started to date. I was too eager to make her my wife again, so within 3 weeks of our relationship, I proposed to her. She was blushing through her ears like the first time when she said yes to me, and we decided to get married right there in Los Angeles. As soon as our marriage ceremony ended, I decided to take her home. We flew from Los Angeles to New York and finally reached our home. The thing that was making me more nervous was that her behavior was starting to change just like before. I was always scared and was always aware of her presence, and if she left my side even for a minute, I started to feel anxious. I couldn't even sleep properly, and one day, it happened. She was gone once again. I could not understand what was happening, so the first thing I did while looking for her was that I contacted every good doctor to know about her condition, but they all told me different things and that they needed to see the patient to know the exact cause. After looking for days, I went to a bar to drink, and when I was drinking, I could not stop my tears from flowing. That was when a woman came and asked me what had happened. I was so drunk that I told her everything. She held my hands and then released them in a sudden response. "The love of your life is cursed. Someone had put her in a loop that triggers her as soon as she gets married. You need to get away from her life if you want to break this loop. Stop looking for her." She started to leave after saying these things. I called out multiple times, but she didn't turn back and left. "Who are you calling, sir?" the man serving the drinks asked me. "The lady who was just sitting here beside me." As I said this, the man looked at me with disbelief and said, "Sorry, sir, but no one was here. You've been drinking alone for almost an hour and a half." I was surprised and frightened by what he had just said, and that's when I remembered what she said about my wife. I exited the bar and went to my apartment. "What's your order, sir?" she said, looking at me standing near the counter. She was wearing the uniform of Domino's Pizza and was smiling at me politely in an official manner. After looking for her in every Domino's Pizza outlet possible, I finally found her again. I guess that woman was right. She's stuck in a loop, and I loved her too much to let her stay alone. So I decided to live in this loop with her, together. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
It was last year when I was working at Walmart as a cashier. Like some other outlets, its opening and closing time was 7 in the morning to 11:30 p.m. This Walmart was a neighborhood market, so there was an average of 30 to 45 employees working there. But something happened on a particular day that makes me avoid Walmart altogether. It was around 11 p.m. and my shift just ended, but there were these last 5 customers who I thought I would take off after I finished running them up. It took around 15 to 25 minutes for me to finish it. Before going home, I remembered that there were a few things that I had to buy for myself, so I thought I should take them from there. I went to the grocery store department and started picking things up for me. And as I was done, I went to the counter to ring them up for myself. For some reason, when I turned around, there was no one in sight, not even a single employee. The store's environment had changed as well. I don't know if it was because of the time or because there was just no one around, but it started giving off a spine-chilling vibe. I shook my head and started humming a Taylor Swift song in my mind. I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift, so whenever I'm happy, nervous, or scared, sad, or pretty much anything else, I start singing or humming her songs, which makes me feel good within minutes. I started ringing up the items for me. It was weird that despite picking up only 5 items, ringing them up was taking so long, as if it was playing on a loop. For some reason, humming the song wasn't working for me because the eerie feeling that I was having at the time just kept getting stronger. Finally, after a long 10 minutes, I was finished ringing them up, and as I was about to leave the counter, I got jump scared when a family suddenly showed up with a cart. There was a husband, a wife, and 2 little girls with them. It was inexplicable how and when they all got in here. And when did they do all the shopping, because I was certain that there was no one around until now. As I was ringing up their items, unusually, there was one item from Department 7 that was no longer available in Walmart stores. So I asked them where they got it, and the wife told me in a straight voice that she picked it up from Department 7. It was weird because I know for a fact that the outlet did not have those items in stock anymore. So how was it that they picked it up? I thought there might be one left in there by accident, which no one took notice of, even though it was unaccountable, but I still made my peace with it. I had to add the amount manually after checking it up for the item, and after that I continued ringing up the next items. They had a long list, and I could tell by the time that it was getting pretty late. While I was ringing up their items, they kept staring at me strangely without even blinking once, which was scaring me deep down. But I was trying to act normal and composed so that they did not notice that I was scared of them. Another item from Department 11 that they had been stopped distributing a long time ago showed up. Nah, it was just too weird to be a coincidence for something like this to happen twice. I hesitantly asked them about the item, and they gave me the same response as earlier. They got it from Department 11. For some strange reason, the item in my hand was giving off an ominous vibe, so I decided to hurry it up and check out those departments. After that, I silently finished them up and told them the total while handing out the bill. They paid for them and left. I could not stop thinking about those items, which I was sure were not available at any Walmart outlet. So I thought of checking the departments out before leaving home. The chilling vibe was getting stronger as I walked slowly to Department 7, and when I got there, I started looking around for the particular item to be there. As I focused on finding the item, I felt the menacing aura coming from one of the bottom shelves. I went ahead to check it out. It was not just 1 or 2 of those items that they had been placed accidentally. Instead, the entire middle row of the bottom shelf was filled with those items. I cannot explain to you the terrifying feeling that I was getting just by looking at them. And I did not have to check the other department to know that it would also have been the same. That was when I got another jump scare when I felt someone's hand on my shoulder. I turned to see the husband of that family standing behind me, but I was sure that they had already left. The man told me that the exit had been locked, so they could not get out of the place. I had a spare key, so I told him to wait for a while. After taking the key and my bag of groceries from the counter, I went ahead near the exit where the family was waiting for me. Even though I was scared of my pants, I kept my calm and unlocked the door. After getting out, I started locking the gate, and when I turned, they were gone. Strangely, I felt a bit relieved by that. I took my bike and headed home. I kept thinking that I would talk to the manager about those items being at the store. And the next day, the first thing I did was go to those departments and check. But it was weird that none of those items were there as last night. It's as if someone removed those items that night. I asked a few other employees, but they all disagreed about having those items at our outlet. So I went over to the manager and told him everything from last night. But after I insisted on him for a long time, he agreed to check the surveillance cameras. As we were looking at the footage, my heart started to drop when I saw that there was no one except for me there the entire time. Even the items I was ringing there. Instead, I was just standing there ringing air. It looked like I was possessed or something. We continued looking at the footage, and even when I went to check on the item, there was nothing and no one, even when I got to the jump scared by that man. After closing the footage, everyone looked at me while I was staring at the screen all terrified. I started feeling my vision getting blurred, and then I fell unconscious. When I woke up, I was in the hospital getting an IV. Even after resigning from my position and never stepping not even a single foot at a Walmart after that day, I still get nightmares to this very day because of that incident.
I don't care. Everyone is coming on the official trip, and whoever doesn't want to come is off the team, team leader Eric announced. We looked at him with annoyance because he always said this. He doesn't care about the opinions of the rest of the team. He simply decides on his own, takes permission from the higher-ups, and says that the team wants this, the team wants that, and simply just informs us that we have to do this. I wonder who wants to stay on this team, I whispered, which was overheard by the person sitting next to me, Carlos, and he tried to control his laughter. Is there anything you would like to say, Carlos? The team leader noticed him laughing and asked. Yes, why don't we all have a pre-trip overnight party on our floor? He suggested, while trying to steal his eyes away from me because I was glaring at him for giving him ideas. What an amazing idea, Carlos. Okay, everyone, tomorrow you will all bring your PJs to the office because we will be drinking all night, and no excuse for anyone. As he announced this, I sneakily smacked Carlos when no one was looking. Everyone else nodded their heads in agreement because they had no other choice. After the shift ended, I grabbed Carlos's hand and pulled him into the smoking area. Are you mad or what? You know how he is, and I have zero alcohol tolerance, right? Why the hell would you suggest such a thing? I smacked his back 3 times while saying this angrily, but he continued smiling. I just wanted to see your reaction, and how else would I be able to see your angry bird side? He laughed and said, which made me even angrier, and I started punching and kicking him, but he continued laughing. I got annoyed and stomped out of there. I was frustrated that the only days we get to rest after working like a horse were supposed to be wasted on overnight parties or some stupid office trip. The next morning, I saw the message in the team group that was sent by Eric that everyone was supposed to bring their luggage along with the PJs for the trip because we would head directly from there. He was just getting more and more annoying, I thought, and threw myself on the bed again. After a while, I got up and started packing my things half-heartedly. When I was done, I called Carlos, and even though I was still angry with him, he was still my best friend, and I could always kill him later. Hello, my angry bird. He said this to annoy me on purpose, but I wasn't going to show him my annoyance yet. You're coming to pick me up, understood? I said. This doesn't sound like a request to me, he said in a playful tone. Because this is an order, not a request. Now, be here within half an hour. I'll be waiting. I hung up after saying that. When I was ready, I exited my house and locked it. I checked the time, and 3 minutes remained for the time limit I gave Carlos. That was when I saw his car stopping in front of the front gate. I knew he would come, because no matter how annoying he was still a good friend to me. He came out and walked toward me. You know the trip is only for 3 days, right? He asked, looking at my suitcase. Don't worry, the suitcase is half empty. I just didn't have any other ones, so I took this, I said while handing him my suitcase. And he acted as if it was too heavy for him. I smacked his head for that reaction, and he started laughing. He put the suitcase in the car, and we got in after that. We drove to the office and saw the team leader standing near the parking area. His expression changed as soon as he saw us together. He always does this. He makes it so obvious that he is interested in me to the point that it makes me uncomfortable. We headed inside the office, and after putting our suitcase and bags in a safe place, we started working. In the evening, the team leader came with the bottles of alcohol in his hands and placed them in the kitchen. After that, he called us, saying that we should start the party. I knew that he was going to try to force me to drink, so I made Carlo drink at my place because it was all his stupid idea anyway. We played multiple games and continued drinking as a result, getting extremely drunk. I couldn't spot Carlos for a while, and that was when the team leader came toward me with a glass in his hand and started forcing me to drink. You were the only one who did not drink properly, so you have to drink from my hands. I refused him, but he kept insisting. He looked pretty drunk because he had started to grab my hands and I kept pulling them away from him. I tried to get away from him, But this time he grabbed my waist and pulled me closer. He forcefully put the glass in my mouth and made me drink. That was when Carlos came and pushed him away from me. "Are you okay?" That was the first thing he asked. He looked at my eyes, which were torn up, and it made him angry. He grabbed Eric by his collar and punched him in the face. Eric was so drunk that he passed out in that one punch. The next morning, everyone woke up completely hungover and blacked out from last night. I asked Carlos not to make this into an issue and let him be this time. That was when the team leader received a call from the director saying that the trip had been canceled because some essential data and files were stolen from the department. He was immediately called to the meeting, and since he was so hungover, he had no idea what was going on. The next day, the team leader came and gathered his things because he was fired from his position. As he was going, he glared at me and Carlos. I could not understand the entire situation, so I looked over at Carlos in confusion and saw him smiling, which made me doubtful about him. He turned his face to me and winked, which made me understand what he was doing all along. Finally, this buffoon did something good. I smiled back and went back to work. It was the day when my boss asked me the most bizarre article to publish about the LGBTQ+ community, since they had always been so private and secretive about themselves. By the way, in my opinion, it was not true. I had seen them being open and oversharing about themselves, but my boss wanted to go undercover and get along with them to get the inner scoop for the article. He did not give me a clear point about what it was that I was supposed to look for. Instead, he just said, "You'll know when you find it." It was frustrating for me to work with him any longer, but since I needed the experience to get a bigger opportunity, I had no other choice. As he instructed, I downloaded Tinder and created a profile for myself. I put my sexual preference on bi and started to wait for the moment when someone gets matched with me. In the meantime, I asked my other gay and lesbian friends some questions about their lives, but whatever answer they gave me did not seem to satisfy me. It was Thursday afternoon when I got matched with a girl named Julie, who had put on her profile that she was a lesbian. As I chatted with her, she told me that she was not satisfied with her sexuality and was thinking of transitioning. I got a strong urge to talk some sense into her and explain to her that she could love her the way she is, but I couldn't because there was a huge possibility it could blow up my cover. So, I played along and tried to act as naturally as I could. She also told me that she had recently accepted herself and broke up with her boyfriend because she no longer felt attracted to him. That is when she felt she was a lesbian. It felt similar to my other gay and trans friends, so I figured not being comfortable in their skin the way we do must be something these people might have in common among themselves. Anyway, she told me she did not want to rush into a relationship so soon, and thinking of taking things slow, which was good for me because that way I could not be feeling too guilty about using her for my article. So we started as friends and continued to engage in chatting daily. I soon found out she was 19 years old and figured she might have made a rash decision by rushing into these sexual identity things. But except for feeling guilty, there was nothing else I could do. There was no way I was going to risk my job over this. You can call me selfish for this, but it was the right thing to do for myself. One evening, my boss called me to inform me that I was taking too much time, and as a result of his impatience, he was transferring the project to someone else. For some reason, I felt a heavy burden getting lifted off my chest because I was tired of deceiving Julie, and I did not want to do that anymore. Now all I needed was to come clean to her, but I did not have enough guts for it, so I simply avoided opening Tinder. 2 weeks later, I got a text from her asking me out on a date, which I agreed to because it was the perfect opportunity for me to tell her everything. We agreed to meet in a cafe in the evening, and she told me she would be wearing a green dress. When I saw the girl introducing herself to me as Julie, I couldn't help but think she looked older than the age she told me. But the way she was talking and holding up the conversation, I was sure it was the same girl I had been chatting with the past few days. She seemed nice and bubbly, so I figured I might be wrong about her age. "Hey, want to come with me to see something nice?" As we were about to say goodbye to each other, she suggested. I wanted to deny it, but I was already feeling enough guilt about not being able to tell her the truth, so I agreed. She walked me to her car and started talking about her childhood as we got in. As she was driving me to the area which seemed secluded, she started telling me how she murdered her gardener when she was 17. I started panicking and asked her to stop the car, but she turned her head to me and said, "Did you think I believed your story of being from the LGBTQ+ community? Hell, even I am not one of them. I was just looking for prey." Her face seemed so monstrous with that evil smile that it freaked me out completely. "Why are you doing this to me?" I said with my voice trembling as I kept panicking. "Oh no, honey, don't be mistaken. None of this is your fault except matching with me on Tinder. It's just that I love seeing others in pain." As she said that, she took out a gun and pointed it at my head. Guess she figured I was planning to jump off the car, so she did not hesitate once to fire the bullet in injuring my left hand. I let out a loud, painful scream, and in response, she moaned and started laughing, which was even more terrifying. I had to do something if I wanted to get myself out of this messy situation, but I could not figure out what to do. That was when my head stopped working, and I simply started wrestling her to take the gun away from her. As I was already in pain and bleeding, I wasn't going to hold out any longer, so I somehow managed to make her lose the balance of the car. As a result, we got into an accident, but she was a tough one. Even after getting injured, she was still holding up, while I was barely keeping myself conscious in the situation. As my vision faded, I heard someone rushing toward the car, and the fading voice of the girl trying to murder me. "No, sir, everything is fine. I will call an ambulance myself. You don't..." These sentences are followed by a gunshot, and everything went blank after that. When I woke up, I was in an emergency room, and a man was sitting across from me. I turned my head, only to find out that the girl was lying unconscious on the bed next to me. The man told me he was driving past us when he saw the accident, but when he went to help us, the other girl tried to kill him. As she pointed the gun at him, he acted quickly, and the bullet accidentally got fired into her stomach. Even after that, he called the ambulance on us and got us admitted to the emergency room. The police came and got my statement. I ended up telling them everything that had happened the past few days. And as I got discharged, the first thing I did was quit my job, which was the cause of my suffering. One thing I was sure of, though, was that bullet in Julie's stomach was not an accident. That guy intended to do that. After a thorough investigation, it was revealed that Julie had conditions of IED, APD, etc., which were developed at a very young age when she was being forced to live the life of a guy by her parents. She killed them and ended up in a mental hospital. But it was 6 months ago when she ran away from there and started killing people. I felt relieved that I got out of the situation when I did. Otherwise, God knows what might have happened to me.
My first experience in a sauna. Let me tell you about how my first sauna bathhouse experience went, which is still one of the most horrible ones that I've ever faced in my entire life. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Sierra Jonas. I'm currently a 26-year-old girl, and I'm proud to tell you that I'm a lesbian. But being a lesbian does not automatically give consent to some women that I'm available or okay with having sex with just any woman, which, by the way, I have experienced many times. I acknowledged my sexual preference when I was 14 years old and had a crush on a classmate, Haley. She was gorgeous, but she was straight, so I never told her how I felt about her. I'd never been to a sauna before the age of 19. It was also planned by one of my best friends to surprise me on my birthday with a free sauna bath coupon. for a newly opened bathhouse as a gift. I know that it was because I had mentioned several times that I wanted to go to a sauna bathhouse at least once before I turned 20. Every single person who knew me was aware of the fact that I was a lesbian, and I guess that most of them thought that if I was a lesbian, then that meant that I already had sex. But in reality, that was not the case, because I was very much a virgin. At that time, I had no idea about the opinions that my friends had of me, just because of my different sexual preferences. So I took the opportunity and went to the sauna to enjoy my time there to relax. As I entered there was a huge lobby where people were waiting, but the place did not have a crowd or anything. There were only a few people there, and on the left corner, there was the reception area. I went there and gave them the coupon. The lady who was there was very polite, and then gave me a warm welcome with a nice smile. She told me about the changing area and the bathrobes, which I was supposed to change before entering the sauna bathroom. When I was done changing into the robe, another lady guided me towards a wooden cabin type room. As I entered, I noticed that the wooden structure, which comprised a hot stone to produce the steam, and the hot temperature was just the perfect way to relax my muscle tension. The lady gave me a few instructions and then left. There wasn't anyone else in there at the time except for me, so I made myself comfortable by removing the bathrobe and starting to relax there. It was my first experience after all. I knew that there were some saunas that allowed multiple people to enjoy the same bath, but I thought that maybe this was one of those private ones. While I was relaxing, I fell asleep without even realizing it. I noticed in my sleep that someone walked in, but I thought it must be my imagination. As I was getting more relaxed and sweating, I felt a set of hands grow up in my breasts. For a few seconds, I thought I was dreaming, but then I jolted awake when I felt a wet body touching mine. When I opened my eyes, I saw two naked women looking at me with full eyes of lust. One was sitting beside me and the other one was standing in front of me. I felt a tightening feeling inside my chest, which was making me scared. "Sorry ladies, you must be mistaken. I'm not here for these kinds of services, so I'll be leaving now," I said while laughing nervously and stood up to leave. But as soon as I stood up, the woman who was standing in front of me pushed me onto the lap of the other woman who was sitting, and then climbed on top of me. As I was about to shout at her, she forcefully started kissing me while I struggled to get away from them. They started touching me in inappropriate areas, pinching me, etc. I somehow managed to kick the woman who was on me and try to run, but the other woman grabbed my hair and started pulling it towards herself. When I tried to scream, they tied a rope over my mouth and then tied my hands with the same tightly. While one pinned me down and held me tightly, the other one played with my body and started to do things to me which felt quite painful. I had no idea how, but they had brought things along with them to rape me and hurt me. I struggled so much, but she kept raping me, and when she was done with me, she switched the positions with the other woman, and then she started to rape me to her heart's content. What I was feeling at the moment was not a feeling of pleasure at all. It was simply just pain and horror. I did not know when I passed out between that horrifying experience, but when I gained consciousness for a few minutes, I was being carried out naked by staff members. They looked worried, so I guess that they had no idea how that had happened to me. I passed out again, and when I woke up, I was laying on a bed in the sauna, and there was a nurse treating me. They apologized to me, saying that it was because of their carelessness that they did not realize that I passed out due to temperature and staying too long in the sauna bath. They said that the reason they didn't take me to the ER was that if they did, their reputation would be tarnished. I told them that two women had raped me, but I guess they did not believe me. I called my parents to take me home. When they got there, I quietly followed them home. You didn't know that staying too long in a sauna could cause low blood pressure and dizziness? You should have been careful. I stayed silent and listened to my mom scolding. I did not tell my parents about this horrific experience because I knew that they would blame it on me being a lesbian. The next day when I reached my college, my friends came rushing towards me. "So, how was the sauna? Did you enjoy it?" One of them said in a tone filled with excitement. I could not respond to that question. "And how was the secret surprise that we prepared for you? Did you ladies enjoy yourselves?" I jolted my head towards the girl who said that, and it was Emily, who used to claim to be my best friend. The horror from the sauna came crashing into my mind, which started to fill my eyes with tears. "It was you who did that to me. I asked with a quavering voice. My whole body was shaking from remembering the trauma of that day. I felt like I was reliving it. She nodded her head hesitantly and then corrected herself by saying, "Aren't you like gay? Isn't it normal for you to have sex with women?" I couldn't believe my ears and just walked out of there. I stopped talking to them after that day and slowly cut off all ties like that. So that was my first and last sauna bath experience, and also how I lost my virginity.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms and half the third floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m., and he said he left his keycard in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary keycard and charged $2 to be returned when theirs is located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied, "Student." At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties and forgore. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not to. Later on in the night, maybe at around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to his room with him. He asked me for my name, and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the room door manually with a master key and told him I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said, "No, it's okay, I'll close it," and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really freaking weird, but I try not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought maybe it was also just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He said that there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no. I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look at it if anything was broken. I had my back to him and he asked me if I could take off my glasses. I said no, I need them to see. His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner, he said, "Ella, it's okay. You can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away and, trying to remain composed, said, "No thanks, I need to keep them on." Even though he was creeping me out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no. I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focused on getting out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the bedroom, saying the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed. Nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking that he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down in a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait, now that I knew that he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. I mean, obviously he didn't. That's why I called you guys crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there. He couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for a student card and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove that he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell that he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said across the street. One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street and he said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and uhs, saying he didn't know. They asked, "Were you trying to see a friend? Did you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know, no reason, I'm just here." At one point he tried to tell them that he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still very insane. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me that they found the door deadbolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again, and to this day I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still give me the heebie-jeebies.
This happened back in 1989, and the story involves my stepdad, biological dad, Donald Duck, and my sister, Sis. The person who exacted the revenge has passed now, so it should be safe to relate. And this is a revenge story that would warrant prison time, I believe. I was living outside the country when it happened, so my sister relayed all this information to me about a year after, and we recently got together and went over the events again. So my biological parents married when they were very young, and Donald Duck was still in law school. The marriage lasted long enough to produce 2 children. They didn't waste time in those days. My sister, who was 14 months, my elder, and myself. They were divorced before I was born. And Donald was a serial cheater, a pathological liar, and a total asshole. He still is at least a liar and an AR. He's in his mid-70s now, so maybe not doing much cheating anymore, but the fact that he is still working as a lawyer, I think has indicated that he was never a good one, and he doesn't have enough to retire. I've looked at reviews on him online, and it's funny to see that most reviewers say that he is not only a terrible lawyer, but a horrible person. When Sis was 22, she was a single mother, and my nephew, her son, was around 3. Her company transferred her to another state, and she discovered that Donald Duck lived in a town near her new work location, and thought that he might be able to help her get out of bearings in a new place. For a short time when we were teenagers, we had some sporadic involvements in our lives after moving to a neighboring city. It was mostly him trying to impress us with how cool and rich he thought we should think he was. So though it has been a few years since she had seen him, it was not like they were strangers. In any case, Donald Duck agreed to let Sis move into his apartment with him, his girlfriend at the time, of course. Many years his junior, and her 9-month-old child, not Donald's, until she was able to find her place. He also offered to allow her to keep her belongings in his storage unit. Says took him up on his offer. Never did Donald Duck make any reference to being paid for the use of the storage unit, or paying for utilities at the apartment. Says stayed for 3 months, and did her best to get out as quickly as she could. And as far as she could once, she became more familiar with the area. Living with him was hard. Did I mention he was an asshole? And her young son would find his pregnant lady porno mags around the apartment. This is pre-internet. Mr. Duck's young girlfriend was able to help with babysitting, something Sis paid her for. Eventually, she got her apartment. But all of her things, her son's toys, her furniture, household items, and everything. But her bed was still in the storage unit. So she called him to figure out how she could get her things back. But he seemed to want to hang on to them for some reason. He said, "You are my girlfriend's money for babysitting, and you can't get your things back until you pay her." She said, "Have you talked to her?" "I've paid her everything I owed her." He put down the phone and talked to his girlfriend, and she confirmed that she had been paid. And then he said, "Well, you owe 1/3 of the utilities for the time you were here." She reminded them that he had never said anything about that. So he got a little heated, and she was feeling desperate and angry. She then shouted an accusation of something he did to her when she was very young, which is a different story. And he responded, "Have you ever told anyone that?" "No," she said. "If you ever do, I will break your neck," he said. And the conversation ended there. She had given up and thought she would never see her things again. When about 20 minutes later, she got a call from an acquaintance who had gone on 1 or 2 dates with Donald before she met my sister. She told Sis that Mr. Duck just called her, asking if Sis had ever told her anything he might have done to Sis, hinting at the accusation Sis had made since I had never told anyone, and the acquaintance told Donald as much as later calls my stepdad, whom we have always is considered to be our dad. And he was the only father we knew growing up, as he was in the picture before we were old enough to remember. He married my mom when I was an infant, and my sister a toddler, and they were together for many years until my mom's death. The guy's had a lot of faults. He passed away in 2017, and we often felt better when he wasn't around. But he tried. It's not easy raising someone else's kids. He was our dad as far as we were concerned, and he'd legally adopted us. He had a lot of issues, but he hated to see anyone being taken advantage of if they were in a weaker position. In other words, he hated a bully, and Donald Duck was being a bully. When I was in the first grade, I rode a school bus with middle and high school students. There were a couple of kids who would bully me, and when he found out, he confronted the bullies and dads, and it ended. Another time, I was in third grade and driving somewhere with him in his pickup around town, and he saw two young teenagers destroying a bicycle that he assumed they had stolen. He stopped and confronted them with his big framing hammer. Years later, he broke my mom out of a mental institution by threatening the director or some doctor, I'm not sure, with that same hammer. Yes, we were a fun family. Anyway, when Sis called him explaining that Donald Duck was holding all of her possessions hostage, she didn't know what to do. He told her that he knew several crisps who would be happy to rough him up and wouldn't even want to be paid. They would just do it for the fun. He was very bothered that Donald was keeping his grandson's things from him and wanted to hurt Mr. Duck. But Sis declined his offer. Then he asked her, what is the thing he values most in the world? His car. She said his car at that point was a Porsche. He had purchased new just a few years before. It wasn't quite the absolute entry-level model, but pretty close. Of course, he had all kinds of arguments about why it was better than more expensive ones, and obviously it was red. Dad was trying to come up with a way to not only get revenge, but to scare Mr. Duck enough to force him to give Sis back her things. She said she was fine with whatever he wanted to do if it got her belongings back, but wanted to make sure none of it could be traced back to her. So nothing happened until about a month later, and Donald Duck called Sis out of the blue as if nothing had happened and asked, "Hey, when would you like to come get your things? How about this Saturday?" He had some change of heart that is unexplained to this day. So she said, sure. She didn't trust him. So she didn't want to go alone. She was able to get a male friend to go with her, and she got a U-Haul, picked up her stuff, and got out. That very same evening, she tried several times to call Dad to let him know that she got her things back, and all was well. No need for any drastic measures. But it was too late. The wheels had been set in motion. He never answered the phone. Remember, these are pre-cell phone days, so when you're not at home, you don't answer. Sis called Mom, who was living separately from Dad for a time. It's complicated, and told her she couldn't reach Dad. Mom said Dad was sick, and that's probably why he wasn't answering his phone. But then at 10:30 p.m., Sis got a call from Donald's girlfriend who asked her, "What are you doing?" "I'm at home in bed. Why?" She said someone just blew up Donald's car. My sister's heart dropped. She knew who did it. The police asked Donald who would want to do this to him, and he says his name. So she now becomes suspect number 1. Sis asked their girlfriend if Donald was scared, and girlfriend said yes. They were spending the night in a hotel. Fortunately, the call from my girlfriend to Sis, just a few minutes after the explosion, gave us her alibi. Sis lived over 30 minutes away and couldn't have answered her home phone if she had been the one to ignite the bomb. But the bomb did its job well. It had turned the Porsche into an unrecognizable wreck, took out the adjacent car, and destroyed many feet of the carport above both cars. I'm guessing the tank in a Porsche was nearly full. Just after Sis got off the phone, she called Mom telling her that someone blew up Mr. Duck's car, and she thinks it was Dad. While she was on the phone with Mom, another call came in, and it was Dad. He said mysteriously, "There's a box outside your door. Bring it in. You never talked to me tonight." Sis was a little afraid to open the box, but it turned out just to be some of her son's items that he had left with his grandpa's clothes and toys. Months later at Christmas, Sis asked Dad about it and he confessed. Turned out he was very sick physically when he pulled that stunt. Sis was touched that he would go through so much effort and risk jail time for her, all while being ill. She asked him if he was scared of driving back, and he said yes, and that every headlight behind him he took to be a cop until he reached the state line. Sis found out from their girlfriend that the cop said the job was very amateur. Certainly not the work of a professional, but hey, it did the job. That Todd said he had asked a coworker who was once a member of the aforementioned Crisps about how to make a car bomb, and she instructed him. He always did love blowing things up. When I was 13, we bonded over crumpling up the old colored sparklers into powder. I don't think they make the colored ones anymore, but they burned hotter, and we funneled the powder into the spent CO2 cart used, and making bombs powerful enough to blow up those old metal milk cans that hold a few gallons. We did this for the 4th of July. Anyway, Sis said it was some sort of Molotov cocktail stuffed in the tailpipe, but I'm not sure how that would work. My idea of a Molotov cocktail is a 750 milliliter size bottle like a wine bottle or a fifth of booze, which would not fit into the tailpipe of a 4-cylinder Porsche. I'm guessing the diameter is no more than 2 inches, not big enough to fit such a bottle. Maybe he used a similar bottle or simply a smaller container of some kind filled with something very ignitable. I truly regret not discussing it with him, but we weren't close since I left home. If you didn't need him, he had a hard time having a relationship with you. Plus, I was married to a woman for many years who kept me from my parents and siblings, so I don't have better details. Thank God that 25-year marriage is over, and my current wife loves my family. One hilarious detail. Donald Duck continued to father offspring and date very young women. His current wife is my age, exactly, and he has a daughter many years younger than my youngest child. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with one of these half-sisters, and she's a marvelous person despite half her DNA. Her mother was never married to Donald, and this sister is the age of my youngest daughter. I told her the story of the exploded Porsche, and she found it very amusing, because she said Donald loves to tell a story about he was prosecuting some mob boss and a couple of thugs came to his door trying to threaten him. Of course, being the big, bad, brave man he is, he didn't back down. And what was his reward? Those thugs blew up his car. I think it's hilarious that he tells this story to his children. But now they know the truth. He's the biggest bullshitter I've ever met. Also, due to Donald's allegations that it was my sister who blew up his car, the condo association or whatever tried to sue my sister for the damage to the carport. But it came to nothing. They were grasping at straws because there was no evidence, of course. But it did scare them and cause her some anxiety.